Hi there, I'm Aaron Ironside. Welcome to Active Intelligence, the show where we promise to give you some balance rather than bias as we take a look at the big issues of the day and let you decide for yourself rather than be told what to think. And today, the issue is one that's right before us in the Parliament: conversion therapy. What's it all about? Why do we need a law to ban the practice in New Zealand? Let's engage some active intelligence. On today's episode, I caught up with Leah Gray, a lady who spent around a decade living the lesbian lifestyle and then decided it was time for a change. She got some help and it worked. These days, she's married with children and saying she's finally living the life that makes her happy. But many of the things that helped her would be outlawed under the current conversion therapy ban that's just passed its first reading in Parliament. Well, let's take a look at conversion therapy, not here, but first in the US, where it's the draconian, weird, quasi-therapeutic practices that cause many people to be concerned, partly because they didn't sound or look much like therapy, and worst of all, those who went through the practices were coerced, where young people exploring their sexuality, struggling with same-sex attraction, suddenly find themselves the victims of conversion therapy.
I felt like they got some sort of weird joy out of torturing children. So I came out to my parents when I was 15. They kicked me out of the house. A couple weeks later, they told me I was gonna go stay with my grandparents for a few weeks, and instead they dropped me off at a conversion therapy camp where they signed over their parental rights and guardianship to this family who promised to make me straight. Conversion therapy is the idea that you can use physical pain and emotional pain to make somebody change their sexual orientation. For me, a lot of the therapy was wearing a backpack full of rocks to feel the physical burden of being gay. And this family made me face a wall for sometimes up to 18 hours. When I kept fighting, they would add more rocks, and then more rocks and more rocks. Got up to be 40 pounds. And they didn't start taking rocks out until I decided to give up on fighting and start playing along. There were 2 boys there when I first got there that both identified as gay. They had to fight each other to be more manly, and if they weren't hitting each other hard enough, then the man who helped run the conversion therapy camp would step in and do the punching for them. So it was in their best interest to hit each other as hard as they could. Went to the same church as my grandparents every single Sunday, and they were told that for this conversion therapy to work, they couldn't look at me, and they couldn't speak to me. That was really, really, really hard. It made me feel like God was punishing me. I felt like that I couldn't change being a lesbian, but that I could just conceal it. I was finally allowed to go to school after 8 months. I wasn't going to tell anybody what was going on because every single time I reached out for help, it just backfired. And then one day they got a call saying that I had been late to one of my classes. And so they told me I couldn't go to school anymore, and I had to put the backpack on and face the wall. I stood there for about 7 hours, and then they fell asleep, and I just left. I didn't take anything. It's like 3 in the morning. I hid in some bushes until the buses started running. And then when I got to the high school, I immediately went to my English teacher and we called the police.
Well, there's no doubt at all that conversion therapy is wrong. First of all, it ain't therapy, is it, folks? No therapy involves putting rocks in a backpack or getting people to fight each other. That's quackery. That's not therapy. That's appalling. And worst of all, of course, the poor young person was coerced, forced to attend, and there's no doubt that this is wrong. So I don't think many of us should have and do have any problems with the fact that this would be unlawful. But the reach of this new law extends far beyond that, so that any attempts to seek help for sexuality-related issues would be deemed a crime, even if that's what you really want. And of course, those who are proposing this law make it sound like the practices we've just heard about are rife in New Zealand, but it's just not true. It's just not happening here. In fact, an Official Information Act request revealed that there only been one informal complaint about conversion therapy. No formal complaints. It's just not happening like that in New Zealand. And so, of course, the media went hunting, went looking for someone, and the best they could find, the closest they could find, was Nelson councillor David Riddell from Living Wisdom. Now, I know David personally. In fact, I've even attended his courses, and I promise you he does not practice conversion therapy. In fact, David is often an uncomfortable person even among the Christian community, because Dave doesn't believe that people choose to be gay. He says in over 30 years he's never met a gay person who was choosing to be gay. But nor does he buy into the genetic determinism that is the only other option, and the one, of course, that the rainbow community holds fast to, which is, well, if we are born this way, you shouldn't attempt to change us. So what does David Riddell actually believe about helping people who want to explore their sexuality? Well, he believes that every human being has gone on a unique journey to discover themselves as a sexual being. We've all had experiences that either traumatized us, or we liked, or we didn't like, that began to shape the way we saw ourselves as a sexual person. And that he believes that sexuality issues fall in the wide basket of issues where human beings aren't happy with themselves.
People are going to recognise themselves in this to some degree. After all, when you think about it, whose sexual identity woke up without any misadventure? Of all the people listening in now, as they think back over what awoke their erotic identity, who has got a misadventure-free awakening? You know, there's unfortunate incidents, there's misadventure, there's trauma, there's abuse, and our sexuality is not free of those things. It takes the punishment, just like every other part of our being. So I don't distinguish conversion therapy, which is a horrible name because it's not really accurate, but I don't distinguish.
What do you mean by conversion?
Gay conversion therapy has all sorts of movie-based images that really muddy the field for any therapist. There's coercion, there's bullying, there's pressure, there's religious pressure, there's Bible pressure, there's ugly, dominating figures in religion bullying people out of their same-sex orientation. It's just horrific.
And how effective is that?
Oh, it's horrible.
But no fruit.
No, it's never going to work, is it? It's never going to work because it's a volitional solution. And a volitional solution means try harder to be somebody you're not. Whereas I'd rather talk about a false self and an authentic self, and the way that the child starts living out of a false self while the authentic self is left to starve. Because false self is built on survival kits, defense mechanisms. You know, when a child starts fantasizing, they're setting themselves up for later a pornography addiction. But that fantasizing is already false self beginning to kick in. When a person's trying to be somebody they're not, they're always bragging or boasting or trying to be better than they are. They're moving into false self. When a person is in escapism all the time, or when a person is constantly trying to get approval, they're moving into false self. And same-sex or opposite-sex identities can also be that false self. If life doesn't work for me as a boy, then damn it, I'll be a girl. And if I hate being a girl, then damn it, I'll be a boy.
So David Riddell, he occupies this middle ground. He doesn't believe in the born gay. He doesn't believe in the chose to be gay. He believes that people are formed and those experiences shape them. And unfortunately, it means that sometimes they're left with bruises and with brokenness that can respond to therapy. Now, not everybody wants therapy, and that's fine. If you're happy with your gay lifestyle, more power to you. It's a free world. You can live the life you want to live. But what if you're not happy with it? What if it's something you'd like to explore, something you'd like to change? Well, like I said, the new law before the Parliament says that would be unlawful. It would be unlawful for your pastor to pray with you. It would be unlawful for parents to try and redirect young children who are looking at things like puberty blockers because that's deemed to be transphobic on behalf of the parent. Even though, in the world of psychology, of course, we know that your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that can think about the future, that can make wise choices, doesn't finish developing until your mid-20s. You shouldn't be making any big decisions about your life when you're 12. We don't let you drive. We don't let you vote. We don't let you drink alcohol. We don't let you marry. But apparently you can decide to change your gender. That seems weird. But what about change? Is it even possible? Because, of course, in the DNA of this issue, the LGBTQ plus community are determined to say, because these issues are in fact genetic, the reason therapy should be off limits to everybody is that it just doesn't work ever, 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 because you can't change the way you really are. Well, that's why I thought it was important to catch up with Leah Gray, who has changed. And I asked her, was her experience of the gay lifestyle a bit like we see in the movies? The woman who has the drunken lesbian kiss while at college. She said it was far more serious than that.
I think we live in a world where we explore anything, don't we? But certainly for me it was just a case of becoming more and more aware throughout my childhood that maybe I was attracted to girls and women rather than boys, and the more I just tried to ignore it and think that it would just disappear, actually the more intense it got. I just thought it would go away, but it didn't, and I tried to resist the feelings as much as I could, but in the end I thought, no, this just isn't going away, and I did enter into various lesbian relationships. That I guess I became aware that while it did sort of fulfill for a period of time, it wasn't what I was hoping for. Those sort of feelings weren't being satisfied. This longing and chasing after what I was pursuing wasn't being met. So it wasn't a fling. It was over the course of many years, but that's sort of my background.
Well, take me back to childhood and to that moment where perhaps you tell your family you come out. What was that like? What was the journey like in terms of exploring these feelings that said somehow you were different?
Yeah, to be honest, I kept my feelings pretty private. I didn't even mention it to a soul, and that was probably my own undoing in some ways. I regret that now. So I never really came out, and my family only really became aware of it much further down the road when I was able to, experience some change in my life. In terms of sort of my own coming out to myself, that was certainly, like I said, I'd resisted it for so long, and then I thought, no, I'm gonna try this out and give this a go. I guess there is a feeling of excitement and relief to say, oh, finally I'm sort of living out these feelings. I guess anyone would experience that after holding it in for so long.
In terms of resisting, I mean, why resist? We live in a world that says if you feel like doing it, you should do it.
It's a great question. I mean, there were probably many reasons why I did. I mean, probably the main one, which is probably most controversial, but it was because I had a faith. My faith beliefs were strong, and I wanted to remain faithful to my God, and so I believed and understood that God's design for human sexuality was to live in a heterosexual relationship, or that was His design, and so I actually, growing up, I wanted that. But my feelings contradicted that, didn't it? So, there was I guess, a natural sort of wrestle within me. But I was I mean, I'm not sure how we'll get to that later, but sort of understanding why there was that wrestle within me brought a lot of clarity later on. But yeah.
Well, as a child, of course, though, it's hard to have that insight and clarity. I mean, how did you make sense of it growing up? That on the one hand, you thought that God wanted men and women to be together, but you didn't fancy men. How could you understand such a thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was confusing at the time, and I guess this is. My faith meant a lot to me. I mean, I had a very deep relationship with God, and I still do today. But, as with all our faith, we go through various times of not knowing the answers to things. And that was just a part of I accepted that as just something that I would grow and mature into, and which I did. But, yeah, at the time I did think, I did question, well, God, A, why did you, I also had gender confusion, so why did you make me a girl? I thought I should have been a boy. And B, why do I have these feelings that, from what I understand, is not what you created? So, of course, there was confusion, but I was like I said, continually growing in my faith and able to sort of work through that over the course of many years.
Those who oppose the idea that one should explore changing their sexuality if they're not happy with it would say, well, things like religious ideas, they just put pressure on people. They make people feel bad about the way they really are, when really they should feel good about the way they are. Was there a sense in which faith was making you feel bad?
Oh, I don't think it was. I wouldn't say it was making me feel bad, because there were a lot of elements to my faith that actually did the complete opposite. My faith was extremely. It gave me great hope and peace, and I think when your faith does that, you're able to sort of work through these sort of elements of faith that are a bit of a mystery. So yeah, I wouldn't say that at all, but it was. Like we all experience through our developing and maturing and growing up, there can be just confusing elements in our life that don't really make sense, but they make sense later on.
So you fully embrace the lesbian lifestyle, the gay lifestyle, you have some relationships, but somewhere along the lines, there's this dawning realization that it's, in a sense, it's not working, it's not fulfilling, it's not filling up that hole inside of your heart. But take us to that moment, that turning point. I mean, it takes, in a sense, courage to try this new life, particularly knowing that your faith and I suspect your family wouldn't have approved. What was the turning point? When did you decide, you know what, actually, I want to go back?
Yeah, and that's there definitely was a turning point, and like we've talked a lot about my faith, but that was just one reason why I wanted to leave the lesbian identity. I guess there came a point where the relationships I had been involved in, and again, I talk from my own experience. I'm not saying that this is everyone's experience, but for me, they were quite oppressive, and I began to realise that they were starting to damage not just myself, but I was damaging others. It was an unhealthy relationship. There was a lot of codependency going on, and not just within my relationships, but I could see it in surrounding lesbian relationships and gay relationships, and also some of the promiscuity that was, again, surrounding just in the circles that I was involved with, and so yeah, I guess I just began to realise this is actually not the gay life that I was that I'd sort of anticipated or what I'd heard about. And I would also say that there were just practical things where I just thought, it's not what I was hoping for in the future. For instance, I actually began to have a real desire to have my own children. That was definitely not something I had ever considered when I was growing up in my teens and early 20s, but something happened and I saw my brother have children, and I thought, that's actually a really, something that sort of began a flame within me, and I know I can appreciate that many lesbian couples do have kids, but I just wanted to share my own biological children with my future partner, and so that was just one of the many reasons why I thought I'd actually like to pursue a life out of this lesbian identity.
We're sold this narrative that there is no way to undo this. You cannot be gay in one season of life and then decide to be heterosexual in another. You're, of course, proof that narrative isn't true. But how does it happen? Can you pray the gay away? I mean, how did you come to this place of being able to turn your life around?
I think the term "pray the gay away" is one that I'm very cautious about, to be honest. Of course, prayer has power, but it's not as simple as just praying the gay away. But I think that through a lot of support and conversation and counsel, therapy, if you want to call it, that I was able to pursue and access, there is possibility for many who desire this change. Change will look different for many people. There's a variety of change that people experience, it's very individual. But for me, I experienced a lot of much change through just conversation with friends and a lot of prayer, but also just conversation with psychologists, and it was deeply impactful and something I'm very grateful that I was able to access. So yes, change is possible. I know many people who have gone through this change and been much better for it. They claim their lives are very much benefited from this change.
So we can see that part of your well-being was spiritual, part of it was emotional. What were some of the key insights and ideas that now when you look back help you understand that earlier period and gave you the strength to make the change? Yeah,
look, the psychologists that I saw, they were just able to unravel, I guess, some of the insecurities that I was experiencing, some of the I would call the untruths that I'd sort of taken on and held on to, and so I guess, I mean, there are many of those, so I won't bore you with them all, but just some of the sort of core beliefs that I'd taken on just in who I was and how I sort of saw others perceive me, etc. Just working through some of these things actually just made my life a lot clearer and helped truth to shine through. And so I think there's like you've said, there's spiritual, there's emotional, there's practical things that we can just really draw on that help us to just further understand why we're feeling certain things, and sort of navigate from there.
Well, your dream of being married with children has become a reality, but how long did it take?
Well, I didn't expect it. I was very much, after this sort of change that I experienced, I was very happy living just in my new freedom and new life. And so I was very comfortable for a couple of years, and then I met a wonderful guy actually in my hockey club, and I didn't expect anything to happen, but of course we just developed a really strong connection, and so within I think about 4 years we were married, and now we've got 2 beautiful children. So wonderful thing.
Does being married with children live up to the hype? Is it finally the case that you have what you were looking for?
Look, I'll say that while we're on this earth, I think nothing can complete us the way I think a relationship with God can. But very much so, my marriage is the most content and secure relationship that I've ever had. And something that I'm very grateful for. So, there are always challenges. There are always, hurdles to get over and so things for me to grow in, as well as as a couple, but it's very much what I'd hoped in a married relationship, and I'm very grateful for it.
Well, as we finish today, let's talk about the law around conversion therapy that is really the one that has many of us concerned. We understand that any kind of therapeutic practice involving coercion, that's out of line, and that some of the things that are being called therapy aren't any kind of therapy at all. But there are a couple of situations in particular I'd like to hear your thoughts about. One is, well, essentially your own story. Under the proposed law here in New Zealand, simply asking a counsellor to help you explore your sexuality because you're unhappy with same-sex attraction would be a potential crime. And for a parent, taking your child to a therapist like that would equally be criminal. And indeed, if your young child asked to be put on puberty blockers, saying that that's not something that you'd like to see happen, would be a crime. These things don't sound like crimes.
No, they don't. And I think particularly when people are consensually pursuing that type of help and support, it's staggering that we are denying people that right and self-determination to be able to pursue what they're wanting. And yeah, you're right with parents. It's terrible that this is being looked upon as criminal, because the parents are doing this out of complete love and care for their children, and they know their children better than anyone. And so it's staggering that these laws are making such normal and wonderful positions of responsibility that are actually the fabric of our society, with good solid homes and parents being able to adequately influence their children. All of a sudden it's being turned on them and they're unable to be able to parent. It's quite horrific.
So there you go. Leah Gray is proof positive that people can change. It might be rare, it might be true that not everybody changes, but heck, not everybody gets cured of cancer, but we don't stop treating them just because it isn't 100% effective. And most importantly, Leah wanted to change, and why shouldn't she be free to pursue the life that makes her happy? After all, the whole point of the conversion therapy law is to say that views shouldn't be imposed upon people. Parents shouldn't be imposing their values, their morals on young gay teenagers and forcing them to be somebody that they're not. And yet this law says actually now you'd be forced to be gay instead of forced not to be, if that isn't what you want to be. I thought that you were allowed to pursue the life that you thought would make you happy. And you should be free to do that. And obviously, if it can't change, it won't change. And so you should be able to at least do the experiment and see if therapy might help with the issue. I can't believe some of the comparisons that are made to justify why even consensual therapy, where someone is choosing, should be off limits. I've heard it compared to the idea that people want to drunk drive, but they shouldn't be allowed to, and they're not allowed to, just because they want to. Well, I don't know what the comparison there is. One reckless moment of choice whilst drunk is not the same as someone who's finding themselves in a lifestyle that's not making them happy and they want to pursue change. They should be allowed to pursue change. And parents, my goodness, they have a burden, a duty of care, a responsibility towards their children. Remember, the same children who are thinking that they have some kind of gender identity issue are the same children who get their left and their right confused, who still don't tie their shoelaces correctly every time. I mean, they're children. We expect them to be confused about lots of parts of life. That's what mum and dad are there for, to help guide, to help direct, and certainly to realize that making choices that are going to affect the rest of your life is such a serious thing. We should wait to do that to make sure that it really is what you want. So you're going to have your say. Select committee process is underway, but that means get in touch with your local politician and say, this law is nuts. It's trying to solve a problem that doesn't even exist in New Zealand. But I want to be clear, coercion and quackery, they are wrong. But pursuing the life that would make you happy, that's the right of every Kiwi. Love to hear your thoughts. Heard anything about conversion therapy? Have you had an experience, good, bad, or otherwise, around this topic? activeintelligence.nz is the website. Make sure you hit subscribe. That way we can send you the episodes every week. And we'll catch you next time on Active Intelligence.